All right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, it's the Friday edition of the program, and my guest is joining me right now, Chiedu Joseph Ugbo, who is the MD at Niger Delta Power Holding Company, NDPHC. We're looking at power sector in Nigeria. Welcome to you, sir, and it's so nice to have you on the program. Welcome, first time.
Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers. Yeah.
Now, where should we start from? Let me just give you a minute and a half to chronicle the power sector for me. I know it will not be, but just a minute and a half to summarize it, perhaps, since the privatization, because a lot of us expected that when the power sector was privatized, that it seems the whole problem has been solved. So chronicle for me in a minute and a half.
Okay. As you well know, the sector was privatized in 2013. So the new owners took over November 1, 2013. Of course, the privatized segments of the sector, you have the distribution companies, all of them, the 11 of them, although government, the buyers, the purchasers of Yola Disco later surrendered that back to government. So we have 10 distribution companies being run by the private sector now, and then of course one in the hands of government, that's Yola Disco. Then the generation companies, that's where you have the power stations, power plants. Of course, 6 of them were also privatized. The gas thermal ones were privatized, and then by share sale, and the hydros were concessioned. The hydros, Jeba, Kainji, and Shiroro, they were concessioned to private investors. So I think part of the problem, soon after the privatization, of course, a lot of issues emerged. They were not unexpected, although the level, the magnitude was beyond what was expected at the time. Issues emerged, especially with revenue shortfall in the market in 2014. That wasn't addressed. All that was done was that the former commission, NEC, provided interim rules to guide the process, just to manage it. And unfortunately, this government came and inherited that with a lot of accumulated debt and all that. There was the 213 billion at the time, yes, but that couldn't really solve the problem. There was the issue of tariff, issue of tariff below what cost reflectivity, and there was also that was also compounded in 2015 with the global downturn in oil prices and affecting Nigeria and the Naira. And then, you know, a lot of issues from there. But in spite of that, this government, I think we took the we took up the gauntlet, despite the challenges. The challenges were enormous, have been enormous, but where the government has tried to move and then to ensure that we have electricity in the country. We are not where we should be yet. We are not where we should be yet, but a lot has happened. We've moved from where it was, about 2,500 megawatts at May 29, 2015, to availability of 7,500 thereabout now. When I say availability,
that being distributed?
No.
Yeah,
we'll come to yes, that's another issue. Even our installed capacity, just the way you have your generators at home, our installed capacity is somewhere around 13,500 megawatts. You know, so all we are doing, and the ministry's effort, the ministers, all of us, is trying to ensure that we optimize this. So because right now, we've pushed from 2,500 to about 5,375, 400. That is what the distribution companies are able to take. So a lot is done. I mean, at least we've doubled the available or actual generation capacity for Nigerians, but we're still, a lot is still being done. A lot is being done. In terms of distribution capabilities, we have also pushed, but that's where the bottleneck is, distribution. And distribution, they will tell you, is all about their tariff, it's all about their the promises government made to them. That's their argument. But the point is that they took these assets and government is holding them to account to ensure that what they promised to do, they do that for the benefit of Nigerians.
Can Nigerians actually have power, available power, affordable as well as available power. I chose my words.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that, can we still have that available and affordable power if the structural architecture is not right? Because I've heard discos, which you alluded to a bit now. Discos have always said, because when it comes to power, they will say discos are always the weakest link. It is the weakest link, discos. But we do know that perhaps there is that structural architecture, we didn't get it right from the beginning. Is that it?
No. It's you see, it all started with the electric power policy in 2001, which anchored the whole structure on private investment. And then which says, okay, down the line, you have to privatize these segments. Of course, transmission company, I didn't mention that, is still in the hands of government. And why that? Because there was no money on the side of government to make the required investment. It was decided that, look, you have to bring in private investors, you have to carry out the reforms, you have to ensure there is a level playing field for every operator in the industry. And that culminated in the privatization. So you have private sectors doing business. Where the whole thing got wrong was where there would have three structures that either of them could have adopted: centrally managed, the pool structure, and of course bilateral. Okay, remove the pool. We can't get there. We are not there yet, but we are doing centrally managed. The generation companies are very comfortable selling to government agencies. So even if nothing happens, they will pay us. You know, when in actual fact it should have been bilateral contracting. And of course, government agency, that's embed, being in the middle to purchase what the transmission company will need for the stability of the grid. You know, it's at the beginning, yes, but it was supposed to be temporary. That embed should buy the powers in the market and then distribute to distribution companies. So now everybody is comfortable. There's a government entity in the middle. The distribution companies are comfortable to owe the government. The generation companies are comfortable to say that the government is owing them. That's where we are now. But a lot of policy directions from the government is addressing that with the new commission in place. Yeah.
Now, there's so much debt in this power system. As at the last data that I have, over 778 billion are being owed to Embed. I think between January 2017 to December 2018. But I think it has run even into trillions, if I'm not mistaken. That's discos to Embed.
Yeah.
How do you think that this issue of debt will be solved? Because you also alluded that the 213 billion we saw in 2013, that has gone nowhere. Even after that 213 billion, there's been a 701 billion naira.
Yeah.
And I think, was it last year or thereabouts? You had 650, or was it early this year? 650 billion naira being touted also in the sector. So we're seeing that trillions of naira going into that sector, yet nothing is happening to a privatized sector. I also know that government has 40% stake in it. So how do you explain all of that? Okay.
The issue of debt, the truth, just like I mentioned, we have the government entity in the middle, the bulk purchaser who buys from generation companies.
Which is Embed.
Which is Embed. So Embed sells to distribution companies. Embed operates more like a flow-through entity now. At the time it was created in 2010, it was meant to be some credit enhancement to incentivize generation. So it's there because at the time, of the reform, it was clearly seen that the distribution companies were not creditworthy, so they wouldn't be creditworthy off-takers to generation. Generation, it takes a lot of money to build generation. Rule of the thumb, $1 million per megawatt. So I have, for instance, 625 megawatts in Calabar. So you can imagine, you work out the numbers, you can imagine how much it takes. So you're not going to put sand in your pocket and build generation. It's going to come from lenders. It's going to come from investors, and investors want to see line of sight. How do we recover our money? So if you're going to sell the power to an off-taker that is not creditworthy, then you're not going to ever get investment generation. So that's why Embed was created, at least for that short period, to ensure that there is investment in generation. So the generation companies that bought, including the government ones like us, we all say to Embed. So at the end of the day, for metered electricity you sell out, the distribution, embed says to distribution companies remit, I think in 2018, the average they remitted back for invoices, it was like 34% of the invoice average over the year. This year, I think they've done, I saw 1 month was 17%, the other month was 22%. That's for between January and February. That's, very poor. No generation company will survive on that. So government, a responsible government, as part of policy direction of the government, they came up with the payment assurance program. That's the one you are talking about, the 71 billion. Because, again, rightly, the government, embed, being a government entity, owes generation companies. So government just say, okay, we will pay this debt while we pursue the distribution companies to get paid back. Do you understand? Because embed now operates more like a flow-through entity. Embed doesn't make any profit from this sales. So the whole money, actually, in actual terms, the whole money is owed by the distribution companies. But there are reasons for that. They will tell you it's tariff shortfall.
Yes.
But tariff shortfall is there. There is what we call market shortfall, which is as a result of collection inefficiency of the distribution companies and, I'm sorry to use this word, indiscipline again by distribution companies. So the tariff shortfall is there, then the market shortfall, they collect, yes, based on the tariff. You say, okay, an example, you say the tariff is somewhere around 30 naira average now. You say it should have been 50 naira, fine. But how much are you remitting? You are remitting less than 40%. You are remitting, about 30%. So there is this 20 naira difference. Do you understand? 20% difference. So that's where their inefficiency and their indiscipline comes in. So that now increases the level of debt in the sector, and all from the distribution companies. And what we're saying is, let at least what you are meant to collect, do some level of efficiency in your collection, and then be a little more disciplined in the way you remit. Because this money is only distribution companies that collect the money for the whole sector. I cannot pay for gas if I don't get paid by embed. And if embed doesn't get paid by distribution companies, then the whole chain comes crashing. That's where the government came in with the 71 billion and said, okay, I will pay you 80% of your invoice so you can meet your gas cost. Honestly, Nancy, that is what saved this sector last year, and that's what is saving this sector now. That finished in 2018, and there was a lot of panic among operators. And then government, again, being a very responsible government, that's okay. We know distribution companies, they owe us, but we will still try and see how we can make generation comfortable to continue to pay for gas, to continue to meet their O&M and other operational costs, so that we'll continue to generate. And generation companies, they've done well. We've recovered idle capacity, the privatized ones, even us, the government ones, we've recovered idle capacity. I just told you, we've moved it up to 8,100, thereabout. Transmission too has recovered wheeling capacity about 8,000 thereabout. Install capacity is there. That's available but not mechanically available. Yeah, yes. And it will be mechanically available if the sector is right. I mean, if the sector becomes liquid and bankable, of course, the owners will quickly fix their machines and then get them to the grid.
The question now will be, what should be the actual cost of power? Or what should be the actual cost of power? What should the actual tariff be? I also know that there are issues around tariff. If you take a look at the MISO 2 tariff, a lot of people will say, okay, we've not factored in inflation adjustment, FX differentials also. You have 305 on one side, you have 360 on one side. Yes. So what is the cost component?
I think it's part of that portion of the tariff shortfall, and I've heard there are different figures being bandied about by the distribution companies, but I think everybody is thinking around somewhere around 50 naira. Although if you leave the distribution companies, they will tell you somewhere around 80 naira, 100 naira. I don't think it's up to that. Maybe somewhere around 50 naira. I'm not sure, but the Regulatory Commission is working on that. They will come on that. But more importantly is the fact that we have to move from the present structure. I think there are some policy direction now. We have to move from the present structure of having the centrally managed and putting the debt on government. We will have to move towards bilateral contracting. And we are doing that in Niger Delta Power Holding Company now. We're discussing with a number of discos, and you know the interesting thing, they are willing. So let us work with you up to, from end to end, from our generation plan to time it gets to end users. If it's Lagos, if it's Abuja, if it's Port Harcourt, if it's Calabar, wherever, let us, if it's Kaduna, if it's Kano, let us, this area, we want to serve them, we want to work with you from end to end. And then we agree with the consumers. We are providing you electricity 24/7. So your competition, of course, will be your generator. So when you compare the rates, you know which one is better for you, and it's going to be, and it's not going to be as expensive. You're not going to be involved in all the stories we've been telling since. So that structure is moving, and I think that's where we're going next. Yeah, yeah.
How do power get to places where there is no power right now? That's one. The issue of meters, getting Nigerians metered. We do know that NEC came up with a policy of MAP. Yes, meter asset providers. In fact, I interviewed the chairman of NEC 2 weeks ago. He was with me here on the show. He talked about the meter asset providers. So I'm asking you two questions right now. The issue of power availability to a lot of places that there's no light. In fact, I've spoken with you off camera about my village, for example. Iselazaba in Delta State has not had light in the last few months, and all of that. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of rural areas that do not have power. What do we do to have those people have power? I know there are issues around, perhaps which you would speak about. Then, this meter asset providers, the MAP thing, is it really the game changer? So two questions in one.
Yes, it's all part of the policy direction of the government trying to resolve the issues, the seemingly intractable issues in the sector. I mean, it's a way to resolve them. You mentioned MAP. There is the payment assurance I've mentioned. Yes. And there is the transmission expansion plan. And there is the distribution expansion plan. And of course, the rural electrification strategy and implementation plan. So these are all part of efforts by the government. I can speak directly. We've spoken about 701. I can speak on the MAP. I'll come to the MAP shortly. But I can speak on transmission expansion, and I can speak on distribution expansion, because the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, other than having 10 power plants with 8 directly connected to the grid now, we're also involved in transmission expansion. We're also involved in distribution expansion. Transmission expansion ensures that we have a very, very reliable network and sustainable that can take the available electricity from the generation plants to where the distribution companies want them. We have about 759 trading points between the transmission and distribution company right now. There has been a lot of argument between the transmission company and the distribution company over transmission distribution interface. I think the Regulatory Commission has waded in on that to ensure that there is to ensure that, yes, the issues are resolved, to ensure that electricity gets to the distribution companies, get to end consumers. It does not matter where they live. So we're involved in that to ensure that the investment, we make the required investment in capacity expansion and rehabilitation of the distribution assets. We're also involved in transmission. We're working on Ihiala right now. The president has graciously approved our request to procure the line. So we're taking the line from Ihiala to Newi to make sure that the industrial areas that are well served. Right now, they are being served on 33, a distribution line from Onitsha, which is completely it's not reliable at all. So we are working on that. The president has just approved on that. We are working on Cmpany to also, as part of the 12 circuits at our Cmpany switching station, which ensures that we marshal all the electricity, or we marshal the electricity being generated in that region to get to the rest of Nigeria. We have a line there from Cmpany up to Jos, constructed by Niger Delta Power Holding Company. I've given you a list of our projects. In the last 3 years, in the last 4 years of this administration, we've completed well over 70-something distribution projects.
Does that translate to power that I put on my
Yes,
power?
that is why, that is part of the reason. I won't say we're completely responsible because other people. Yes, but that is why we're shifting the level or the extent of supply to get to end users. We are not there yet, but we are moving. We are moving. So it's part of that. The rural electrification strategy implementation is being implemented by ROA, and they are working. They are doing energizing economies. You know that. They are doing, Sura is there, Ariaria and Sabongari Kano. They are working on those. They are also working on energizing education. The minister just flagged up the Ebonyi, the Lake Sekweme University, Ebonyi State. So a lot is being done to ensure that power gets to where it has not reached before.
Now the question will be: the next 4 years.
Yes.
Will Nigeria have? Will Nigerians have power in their homes and in their businesses?
At the level we are working on now, I believe so.
To what extent?
Yes, I believe so. What I think up to 2020,
2020 is next year.
We're working to optimize. That is the ERGP forecast. We are under the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. We're working to optimize the available generation up to 10 megawatts. Don't forget we have up to 13 megawatts available. The 10 megawatts to ensure that they take, which means we have a responsibility now to make sure that at 5,000 megawatts more get to end users. And that might seem huge, but it's not impossible. We are working. We have clear plans. Government has clear plans to make sure that this is done. And that's what, and it's being implemented. There are policy directions. We just talked about meter asset provider that will help on collection efficiency. Collection efficiency that will make people to pay for what they consume. So the dispute between users and
consumers and
discourse will be eliminated. And so all those are efforts being made to ensure that consumers get served.
One last question: the way this sector is right now, do you think that we can have additional investors come into the sector, and is it attractive enough? If it's not attractive, what can be done? Just a few seconds. Yes,
Nancy, you mentioned a number of them. The metering asset provider is one, and there are investors coming in.
Yes.
The franchising that the regulator is working on now is another one, and there are a lot of people queuing up to do that. All these things will make the sector bankable. Once the sector becomes bankable, investors will come in. All they want is line of sight to collect for recovery. It's a business. It's a huge business. Available investors will come in.
Okay, should I give you just a few seconds for your closing remarks? Do you have any other thing to say, or we've said?
Just for us to be, just to tell consumers, the government is doing a lot to ensure that we have electricity available to Nigerians. What we need is just a bit of patience. I know, as a matter of fact, when privatization was done, that was before this administration. We did not manage public expectations but now we are working on a lot of things.
Is it that we didn't manage public expectations, or the investors came in thinking that it was going to be a money spinner immediately, and it was not like that?
No. We didn't manage. The public expected a whole lot because the government at the time was saying, we have privatized, we will have light. But not knowing that these guys, they have 5 years performance agreement, which of course a lot of factors have come into make it impossible now. But we are doing, Nigerians should be, all I would say is Nigerians be patient. This administration is working tirelessly. I know, I don't sleep. My chairman, the vice president is on me. The minister is on me to make sure that we work. In addition to the plants, managing my generation stations, I also, there's a lot of investment in transmission and distribution. Okay, I think we'll take you up on that. God willing, the next 4 years we will all be alive and we'll hold you to account, and not just to account, the whole government. This is next level government. Yes, next level, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.